Most of my adult life, the word on the street has always been that the fishing industry and the fishing community is dead.
It's a dying industry at this point, unfortunately, and I think that because the fleet has been already reduced again and again and again and again, who in their right mind would try to make a business plan on a fishing boat if you know in 5 years they're going to cut you back even more?
There'll be many folks pretty much not having enough effort to survive financially in this business, not enough to maintain a business or a family.
When you hand a public resource or the control of a public resource to private individuals, that is privatisation. And from there it's a slippery slope to consolidation and down the road probably corporate consolidation.
America has always associated fishing with the New England area. The states of Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire provide the country and the globe with millions of pounds of fish each year. Towns such as Gloucester, New Bedford, Chatham, and Port Clyde are instrumental to keeping this industry alive and feeding people all over the world. Over the past decades, fishermen have been facing increasingly strict regulations that manage everything from type of gear they use to the amount that they are legally allowed to catch. On May 1st, 2010, a new regulatory system will be put in place in the New England groundfish fleet, which many fear will only further beat down an already battered industry. The implementation of this new system, known as sectors, can be traced back to decades of government regulation that set the stage for where the industry is today. In 1976, the Magnuson-Stevens Act was passed with the purpose of governing marine fisheries management in the United States. Magnuson is the primary piece of legislation that dictates marine management in the U.S. and its surrounding waters. Since then, amendment after amendment has been passed to enforce new regulations. The act was reauthorized in 2006 under President Bush and put in place a 10-year rebuilding timeline on all fish stocks to get back to sustainable levels due to depletion from overfishing.
Magnuson did a few things. It set in place the 200-mile limit that kept foreign vessels out of our fishing area. It told the fishing community, based on agreement at the time, the fishing community has slow down. We need to rebuild and build a sustainable community.
Now you had Magnuson-Stevens, and the country got serious about regulating the fisheries. You had, at that point, they came in, the feds came in and overcapitalized the industry, because we were in the dark ages fish-wise. The foreign fleets had been there essentially since the end of the Second World War and had done a hell of a job vacuuming up the resource. It was pretty much unbridled fishing for the crumbs that were left. So by the late 80s, we were in dire need of regulation. I do believe that. And the 12 councils got up and running, as was requisite by Magnuson, and we started to go into the council process for the regulation.
Magnuson set up councils in each region made up of 18 voting government administrators and industry personnel who manage and dictate the policies that will be implemented in each region.
The basic process of fisheries management in the United States is that we have the Magnuson-Stevens Act. This is basically sets up how the nation wants resources managed in fisheries, and that has its national standards. Now, each council is tasked with managing the resources of its fisheries, and it has to comply with those national standards. So the council gets to decide what they want to do as long as it complies with the laws and those standards. And then the job of NIMS is to provide them both assistance in doing that, to make sure that they do comply with all the laws and all the requirements, and then to actually implement the plan that does meet those requirements into law.
NIMFS, or the National Marine Fisheries Service, is a division of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that is responsible for the management, conservation, and protection of living marine resources within the borders of the United States and its surrounding ocean territory. Over the past years, a growing distrust has been building between the fishing industry and NIMFS due to what many see as heavy-handed regulation and outrageous fees and fines. In February 2010, relatively unknown Eric Schwab was appointed the new head of NIMFS and will be overseeing the upcoming sector conversion. Schwab has admitted that he is not familiar with federal fisheries, but I need to get up to speed.
Now we have, and John Kenny took the lead in this with some others, in exposing the abusive enforcement. I have to say this, I wish, because I'm on the Financial Services Committee, I wish the federal government had treated some of the people in the financial industry as harshly as the NIMFS has treated the fishermen. They got it backwards. They have it absolutely backwards.
We are not allowed to know the basic elements that the attorneys used in setting the fines. So we end up in an impossible situation, and as a result, many fishermen do settle. They settle at amounts they can't afford to pay. Ultimately, 2 years later, some amount comes due, they lose their boats, they lose their homes, they lose the ability to put their children through college, and they lose an important part, we lose an important part of our culture.
It's about enforcing the law. We don't have any problem with that if the law is fair and if it's applied fairly. That's why we asked for the Inspector General's report. That's why we're so upset when it came back and showed the impropriety of the number of fines, the size of fines they've been imposing in the Northeast in particular, but around the country. And that's going to stop.
In January 2010, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Commerce issued a report that reviewed the policies and procedures of the Office of Law Enforcement and the General Counsel for Enforcement and Litigation within NOAA. The report made damning statements about the current climate between NOAA and the fishing industry and came to various conclusions. The report found systemic nationwide issues adversely affecting NOAA's ability to effectively carry out its mission of regulating the fishing industry. These issues have contributed significantly to a highly charged regulatory climate and dysfunctional relationship between NOAA and the fishing industry, particularly in the Northeast region. Additional conclusions were that broad fishing regulations have become increasingly complex and onerous. Regulations impose an excessive administrative burden on regulated parties. Regulations change with little or no advance notice and increase in complexity, and that federal regulations in some instances conflict with state regulations. In addition, the report found that NOAA had issued over $5 million in fines and settled for approximately $1.5 million of that total from the time of July 1, 2004 to June 30, 2009. The report stated that based on these statements and NOAA's actions, the perception exists that NOAA is intentionally putting small fishermen out of business in favor of corporate fishing entities. This report led to the eventual firing of the head of the NOAA Law Enforcement Office, Dale Jones, on April 8, 2010, after an 11-year reign fraught with controversy. The reason many feel that they are being forced out of business is due to Amendments 13 and 16 of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Currently, fishermen fish under a days at sea system, where they are given an allotted number of days to fish based on permits they own. In those days, they can only catch a certain amount of pounds on each trip and must simply throw away anything extra in a wasteful process known as discarding. With Amendment 13, the government put in place guidelines for properly rebuilding fish stocks. Amendment 16 further shaped rebuilding efforts and cemented the implementation of a system known as sectors, where fishermen fish for a share of the total allowable catch, TAC, based on the rebuilding timeline put in place during the reauthorization of Magnuson in 2006. Starting on May 1, 2010, 17 sectors will become fully operational in the Northeast region. Fishermen may still stay in the common pool and fish under days at sea, but they are limited to the leftover allocation that the sectors do not use up.